Hi there, I'm Justin Pritchard for Driving.ca, and in this video, I'm giving you a few of my favorite used car test drive pro tips with an eye for efficiently using your test drive time to help make potential trouble reveal itself. So we're going to turn you into a bit of a used car test drive detective, and I'm steering you towards these tips based on over a decade and counting of regular used car buyer's guides and research. For context, these tips are intended for shoppers buying a modern gasoline-powered car or crossover that was built within the past 10 years or so. We'll be using various cars to illustrate the tips here, including my all-track, and I'll walk you through a few of the steps that I'd be taking when test driving this or any other modern used car that I'm considering buying. So if I was buying this car or any other, I'm first making sure that I arrive at the test drive with a floor mat or a piece of carpeting, a flashlight, a rag, and some gloves. This all makes it easier and more comfortable to get up close and personal, look underneath, check fluids, and the like. If you're unfamiliar with how to do that sort of stuff, it's okay, because the second thing that I want to do before arriving is make sure that I have my plan for a pre-purchase inspection or PPI set up ahead of time in case I wind up buying this car. Now that's an inspection made by a trained professional of the used vehicle that you are considering as a final step before you buy it. It helps make sure nothing is getting past you, and it is your single best defense against buying someone else's headaches. Getting a PPI is done on your dime, and usually you set up an appointment when you know you want to buy the particular car. But first you'll want to make sure the seller will let you take the vehicle in for that inspection, or drop it off for you, or maybe meet you there. So if you can budget a few extra bucks and an hour or two to set this inspection up, you eliminate a pile of uncertainty about the true condition of the vehicle. So with my PPI plan set up, I also want to arrive knowing where the nearest stretch of rough road is, because I'm going to use that as a diagnostic tool. Where I live, it's not hard to find a rough road. If it is where you live, check on Google Maps or do a recon lap of the area before you show up. And finally, ask the seller to make sure that all service records and documentation, as well as the owner's manual, is in the car and ready for inspection. You'll want to be checking all service records against the service schedule in the owner's manual to make sure that nothing's been missed or skipped or stretched, which, by the way, could void remaining warranty coverage, so you need to be making sure that you can connect all of the dots with the service history. So let's start outside with three main areas to check. And first, you're going to pop the hood, touch the engine carefully. Hopefully it's cold and hasn't been run recently to maybe warm it up and conceal some problem. Check all of the oil and fluids, the air filter if you know how. Have a look around with your flashlight for signs of nesting rodents or fluid leaks and seepage, and continue inspecting anything you're comfortable inspecting based on your experience. But remember, a PPI inspection will do a much more thorough job than you will, but for many used car shoppers, these basic inspections are fairly easy. If you're not handy under the hood, then just skip this stuff, but make sure that you get that PPI, which will do it for you. So the air filter in this particular car actually needs a special type of screwdriver to open, which I don't have with me. Not a big deal. Again, if you're getting a pre-purchase inspection, that's going to be checked out as part of that process. Next, get someone else to start the engine while you listen with the hood open. Engines are noisy, that's fine, but listen closely for a loud, sort of out-of-sync clanking, popping, smacking sound, even if it disappears after a moment. And if you hear it, proceed with caution and have a professional check things out. The next area to check before we get on board is around the wheels and tires, and maybe your floor mat will make this part more comfortable for you. For tires, you want to check the tread depth, check for uneven wear across the treads, which is usually an alignment problem, and carefully check the inner and outer sidewalls for lumps, tears, cuts, and damage, which can be a safety concern and might prevent the vehicle from passing a safety inspection. Also important to mention, tires have two sidewalls, one on the outside and the inside sidewall here. You want to check that as well. You may only be able to get your hand in there and sort of feel it for signs of damage, lumps, rips, tears, and so on. You can also use the flashlight that you brought along here to make that a little bit easier. While you're down here, check the brake rotors, these round discs if you can see them through the wheels, and they should be pretty shiny and smooth. Rings of rust or gouges mean a brake job is probably in your near future. This is going to depend on the type of wheel on the car that you're looking at. You can see here I've got enough of a view I can kind of take a look at that brake rotor through these spokes. That's that shiny metal disc inside here. You want this to be as smooth and shiny as possible. You can see here this one's showing some wear. You want to be really on the lookout for deep grooves and rings of rust. Those are both signs of trouble. Shine your flashlight up, looking at the suspension if possible, and if you're able to see it, you might also see fluid leaks down the tube of the shocks, which are a sign of wear and tear that could cost you money. And the third area I'm checking at this point is the body and finish, starting down near the wheels where we already are, with a look at some of the most vulnerable areas of the car. Check the rocker panel area, the inner seam of the front fender for missing paint or rust, open the door and check the rocker sill, the lower inner edges of all doors, and the hood and the tailgate. Rust often likes to hide in places like this. I'm also checking under the door up here. I can peel this weather stripping away a little bit. Rust likes to hide out under there, so you can generally just peel that down a little bit and take a look for rust as well. Lower lip on the bottom of the tailgate here on the outside is another area where rust and damage like to typically hide out. You can see here the paint has peeled off or maybe been damaged on this particular vehicle, so that's inviting some rust to probably start forming. And I'm actually just noticing this now, to be honest. So now that I see this, I'm probably going to want to get this painted to keep any rust from forming, help keep my resale value up. So that's a good initial meet and greet. There are other areas you'll want to check before you start driving too. You can find those in the in-depth article I wrote over on Driving.ca, linked in the description below. This video is a summary of that article, so for more info on what we're covering here, including the on-the-road diagnostic checks I'll be giving you momentarily, you'll find the full scoop in that story. And if you're new here, consider subscribing so you never miss a new upload. So on the road, at the wheel, a few things I'm going to do to find clues about possible trouble in any used car I'm test driving. First, I'm going to head to that rough road that we found back at the start, and I'm going to quiet the cabin and drive down that road at a reasonable speed, listening and feeling very closely for signs of suspension trouble and wear. Suspension gets noisy on rougher roads. Usually it's sort of a dull roar, and that is fine. So are little squeaks and rattles from inside the car that may or may not pop up. What's not okay in this setting is clunking, popping, crashing, or snapping sounds coming from beneath, especially if you can feel them through the floor of the vehicle. These are often signs of suspension wear or damage, so if you hear anything unusual, get that suspension and front end checked before you buy. So next we're going to do the used car version of the 0 to 100 to 0 test, although in this particular situation we're okay to go 0 to 70 to 0 instead. Where appropriate, you want to accelerate up to a given speed, 70 or 80 kilometers an hour maybe, and then stop the car from that speed. And you want to do it 3 times. Once very slowly, gentle on the throttle, and almost just riding the brakes down to a slow stop. I want to make sure that all of the 6 or 7 or 8 upshifts of the automatic transmission feel basically invisible here, and I want to feel the brakes for signs of a pulsation or a wobble and listen for any funny noises in the process. The second time you do this, use more throttle and brake faster. A little on the heavier footed side is good. Work the engine a little harder, listen closely, feel for smooth and consistent shifts, and when braking with a good bit of force, notice if the car tries to pull to one side or the other, or if the brakes feel spongy or sound funny. Specifically, from the brakes, you're looking for a scraping or grinding sound. Now we'll do it a little bit faster, a little heavier on the throttle. And a little harder on the brakes. And the third time you do this, full throttle, get that engine spinning fast. Get in a few full throttle upshifts, make sure things feel and sound okay. Then when it's appropriate and safe, some heavy braking. So the car stopped in a straight line, the brake pedal didn't go to the floor, it didn't start feeling spongy the deeper I pressed into it, and I had a good initial bite when I first started applying the brakes, so I don't have any major concerns about how the brakes feel in this particular car. Does the brake pedal feel soft? Does the car pull to the side? Does the brake pedal go to the floor? If so, get those brakes looked at before you buy. And for all of this, use your judgment. If something feels or sounds funny, it probably is, and usually it's going to be a relatively painless fix, but that pre-purchase inspection becomes even more important here to pinpoint the potential trouble and the cost to fix it. Now this particular car has a manual transmission, meaning that the quality and smoothness and consistency of the upshifts and downshifts are up to me and not the transmission itself per se. But in a manual transmission, I am going to do a different sort of test that can help coax out signs of a badly worn clutch. So ideally, you want to find a steep hill on the highway with plenty of room, and you want to go up that hill in a high gear at low engine speed. So maybe 40, 50, 60 kilometers an hour in third or fourth gear, where the engine isn't lugging, but the revs are really, really low. So I'm heading up this hill here. It's the steepest one I've got. I'm going to go 80 kilometers an hour. I'm going to go in fifth gear, and I'm to the floor now at about 74 kilometers an hour, 1800 RPM, 1900. The engine's kind of struggling here, but this is really loading up the clutch. And if this clutch was in bad shape or worn out, that would be where it would tend to be slipping. So that specific combination of going up a hill, low engine speed, and full throttle puts a lot of load onto the vehicle's clutch. And if that clutch is badly worn, that setting is typically where you'll feel it start to slip. And if you do, it means that vehicle probably needs a new clutch sooner than later. So we've listened for suspension trouble, felt for powertrain and braking trouble, and let's do one more little test for the front end. With the engine running but parked, turn the wheel fully from one side to the other several times and at varying speeds. If you feel a notchy or inconsistent sensation, or if you hear a clunking or heavy clicking sound in the process, you'll want to have the front end and steering system checked over before you buy. A little clunk when I do that. So I'm actually going to put the microphone down closer to the floor here, see if you can hear it any better. And so if I were buying this car used, I would be definitely getting that checked out before I bought it. So that's about it for this video. These are what I consider some of the quickest and easiest means of making sure that you've done some basic on-the-road diagnostic testing before you buy. For more information on things like common water leaks, the importance of software updates, and the various types of hell a dying battery can unleash on that used car's electronics, and plenty more, check out the link to the full story in the description below. Well, thank you for watching. My name is Justin Pritchard for Driving.ca, and until next time, take care and drive safe.